Good day and welcome to my study. My name is Christopher Kopitar, and I will be teaching you today about the Continental Army's experience during the winter of 1779 and 1780 in Morristown, New Jersey. This takes place during the American Revolutionary War, the fight for freedom against England and Great Britain. For today's lesson, I ask that you have a pencil or a pen, as well as 2 sheets of paper. I'll give you a few moments to get ready, and then we were able to move on. While you're getting your materials, I would just want to explain a little bit about New Jersey itself, because New Jersey has a very historic history to it, or a very eventful past. As one of the original 13 colonies, New Jersey has long been at the center of American life. By the time the American Revolution comes, about 150 years after the founding of New Jersey will want to play a pivotal role. And today we're going to be looking at one of the most trying times for the American Army during this time period. So hopefully by now you were able to get your 2 sheets of paper and a pen or a pencil. I'm just going to take a short moment just to introduce myself, just so you can know me a little bit better. And from there, we can then move on to our adventures that we're going on, because we will be traveling. We will be checking out different locations, which is going to be pretty cool, pretty interesting. So first, I'll explain a little bit about myself. As previously stated, my name is Christopher Kopitar, and I teach 7th grade history at College Achieve Patterson Charter School in Patterson, New Jersey. I am also a historian and have been teaching history for 6 years. I am a graduate of Montclair State University, and just want to let you know it's going to be a pleasure to be able to teach you today and work with you and just enjoy and hopefully spark that interest in history that I had sparked in me when I was in high school and middle school. And you could go on adventures and enjoy and learn not only about America, but New Jersey and yourself in the process. Please take your 2 sheets of paper. On the first paper, at the top, nice and big, I want you to write notes. Okay? And at the top corner, I want you to put a 1. Now, I'm going to switch to a different sheet of paper, but I want you to just flip your paper over. So take your paper and just flip it over for me. Okay? And at the top of that paper, please write Morristown Argument. Morristown is spelled Morristown. Morristown. And write argument below it. And at the top corner of that, please put a number 2. Once you have that finished, please move to your second sheet of paper. And at the top of that paper, please write Morristown Letter. At the top of that, please put a number 3. Thank you. And finally, if you flip that paper over, on the top of that page, please write Exit Ticket. And at the top of that, please put a number 4. So I'm just going to review real quick, just so we're all on the same page. We all have what we need to get done. So on your first piece of paper, at the top, you should have the word notes written. This will be our note catcher. This is where you're going to put down anything that I talk about that you find interesting, or stuff that I ask you to write down, as well as anything that I might project or hold up for you that will be helpful for what we're doing today. The Morristown Argument, we're going to be using a little bit later, where you will get to take the role of a general on George Washington's staff and actually craft an argument of why Morristown is a good place to be. On this piece, on the top of the second sheet of paper, the Morristown Letter, you will be creating a letter home to either family or to friends or to someone that you want to write home of what life is like for you as a soldier at the Morristown encampment. And finally, on the last sheet of paper, please write Exit Ticket. This is what we're going to be doing at the end, and you'll be using that during that time period. Thank you. So let's go over our objective for the day today. I will learn about the experience of the Continental Army during the winter of 1779 and 1780 in Morristown, New Jersey, by analyzing primary sources and creating a letter describing the experience. Let's go over it one more time, just so we're on the same page. I will learn about the experience of the Continental Army during the winter of 1779 and 1780 in Morristown, New Jersey, by analyzing primary sources and creating a letter describing the experience. Now, for us to get a grasp on that, we need to know what a primary source is. Now, this is something that you may have heard from a friend or a teacher. Maybe you're watching a History Channel documentary or doing a project in school. So what is a primary source? I want you guys to take just a few moments just to jot down what you think a primary source is. I'll give you a few moments and I'll wait. All right. Oh, you guys are doing good. I like that. JD and Angel, very, very good. Curtis, Tiffany, you guys are on fire, doing great. Shakur, Jeanette, awesome job today. Jasmine, Shannon, to a knocking it out of the park. Awesome job, guys. So what is a primary source? A primary source is an artifact, document, diary, manuscript, autobiography, recording, or any other source of information that was created at the time under study. It serves as an original source for information about the topic. So today, we're going to be looking at diary entries. We're going to be looking at reports. We're going to look at statistics. We're going to visit some places where these things actually took place, including Morristown, and seeing the actual building in the grounds where this took place 240 years ago. So I hope you're ready to go on an adventure, because it's going to be history, and it's going to be fun, and we're going to learn a lot today. So let's move to our question of the day. Question of the day is, what was the American Revolution? So I want you to just take a few moments just to jot down a few things that comes to mind when you think of the American Revolution. I'll give you a few more moments to get that done. Henry, I like what you have there. Very good. Jamar, that is very well written. Leslie, that is awesome. Very good. Same with you, Manny. Great job. Vanessa, can't ask it better. That's amazing. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it back in. And what was the American Revolution? The American Revolution was a colonial revolt which occurred between 1765 and 1783. It encompasses the Revolutionary War, which was between 1775 and 1783. Now, the revolution is the protest, it is the build-up to the war, it is the issues that eventually will lead to the war. Where the Revolutionary War was the actual fighting between 1775 and 1783. The American patriots in the 13 colonies defeated the British in the American Revolutionary War with the assistance of France, winning independence from Great Britain and establishing the United States of America. Wow. That's our founding. That's how America came to be. We need to ask ourselves, what is independence? So, what do we think independence is? Well, to get through this a little quicker, independence means being able to take care of your own needs and make and assume responsibility for your decisions, while considering both the people around you and your environment. America felt that after about 150 years of its existence as a British colony, that it was ready to be on its own, that it didn't need England, which is 3,000 miles away, to be making decisions for them. They felt that their own legislator, their own government, their own governors could make those decisions for them, especially since they didn't have a say in what really happened in England. So now let's ask ourselves, what was going on in America during the fall and winter of 1779? Well, New Jersey is known as the crossroads of the Revolution. It's certainly earned that title, but that's something we're going to get back to towards the end of the lesson. But just to set the scene of where we are at this time period, fall 1779, Continental Army is now in its fourth year of existence, fourth year fighting against England, the strongest, most powerful military on the entire planet. So in late November 1779, General George Washington decided that the Continental Army would return to a familiar location for winter camp. At this time, very few battles happened during the winter. Keep in mind, there's no cars, there's no airplanes. You have to take everything either by horse or walk it to wherever you're going. So during the winter, it was very difficult for armies to travel from one place to the other. So usually in late fall, they'd find a camp, they'd settle there, and they would stay there until May, June of the following year before they start fighting the war again against the enemy. Seems kind of strange today, but this is how things were back during the American Revolution. Anyway, General Washington chose Morristown, New Jersey, where they had spent the winter of 1776-1777 after the historic victories in Trenton and Princeton. Trenton is the one where General Washington crossed the Delaware on Christmas night and did a surprise attack against the German Hessians in Trenton, which is also located in New Jersey, as well as Princeton. Morristown made strategic sense for a number of reasons. It was between Philadelphia and New York, where the British were encamped, Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress was being held. It was the home to several skilled tradesmen, local industries that produced weapons and supplies, and community was able to provide enough food for the war-weary army. The first day had been uneventful. However, the winter of 1779 was anything but. The season was one of the most harshest on record, as 28 snowstorms turned Morristown into a frozen wasteland. We reached the wilderness about 3 miles from Morristown, wrote James Thatcher, who was a surgeon in the Continental Army that winter. We are building log huts for winter quarters. The snow is on the ground about 2 feet deep, and the weather is extremely cold. Now, in 1776, Washington's officers has used Jacob Arnold's Tavern, located in Morristown Green, as the urban center for the Army's headquarters. Washington himself stayed in a nearby Ford Mansion. But this second encampment was in nearby Jockey Hollow, not far from Morristown, but it was in the woods. Soldiers were ordered to build log huts rather than live in the comforts of the town. As supplies for food and firewood dwindled, one soldier named Joseph Plum Martin wrote that his comrades were so enfeebled from hunger and cold as to almost be unable to perform the military duties or labor in the construction of their huts. Now, miraculously, Washington's men rallied, and when spring arrived, by June 1780, the Continental Army claimed victories at the Battle of Connecticut Farms and the Battle of Springfield, the last major engagements of the war in New Jersey. Now, we're going to go on a short adventure. We're going to go check out 3 different locations that were pivotal in the American Revolution. We will be first stopping at Garrett Mountain. Now, Garrett Mountain has a place known as Rifle Camp Park. It is located in northern New Jersey along the Watchung Ridge. We will be going to Paterson, New Jersey, where we would take a look at the Paterson Great Falls, where 3 very special and important people of the American Revolution stopped to have a dinner underneath the falls. And we will go be visiting Ford's mansion in Morristown, New Jersey, where Washington actually stayed to keep his army in winter's quarters in both 1776 and 1777, and what we're looking at between 1779, and 1780. Now we're gonna go take a trip there. I'm gonna do a quick wardrobe change because when you go out, you always want to look professional. So I'm gonna try to look extra fancy today while we go look at these 3 different locations. So I'd love if you're able to come with me, put on your adventure hats, and let's go. Here we find ourselves at our first location. This is Rifle Camp Park, also known as the Great Notch. On October 23rd, 1780, the light infantry was stationed here. The hill on the northeast side of the notch was used by Washington as a lookout to observe the movement of his troops. So Washington stationed himself here at this location also to keep an eye on his troops. And further up here, which we'll be visiting next, is the location where riflemen were actually stationed to keep an eye on the British troops located in New York City. Now we're going to continue on our adventure, and we will be traveling up to this area to get a better look, a better view, and more history within our own backyard. Where I am right now is a location where General George Washington stationed several of his American riflemen to keep an eye on the British Army that was encamped in New York City. The British had control of New York City between the summer of 1776 to 1783 and the end of the Revolutionary War. The British gained control over this following the Battle of New York in the fall of 1776. This was shortly after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. Now, the Declaration of Independence stated that the American colonies are, and of a right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved of all allegiance to the British Crown, and that any political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. That is what the Americans were fighting for during the Revolutionary War. Freedom and independence from what they saw as a tyrannical, evil, controlling British government. The American soldiers who were stationed here leaned up on the trees that are right behind me, or sat on the rocks behind me, or walked the same trails that I'm on right now. This is yet another example of American history located right in your backyard. This location, located in the Watchung Ridge, known as Garrett Mountain, is where these men were stationed. This park has the name Rifle Camp Park after the riflemen who camped here and protected Washington and his army located in Morristown throughout the Revolutionary War. You might have seen signs like this posted around where you live. These are historic landmarkers. That means something significant happened either at that location or near that location in American history. So this sign for the Watchung Ridge states, running from Mahwah to Bound Brook, the Watchung Ridge served as a natural barrier to protect George Washington and his troops. The bulwark that saved a nation helped keep the American supply lines open. So this is located in the area where we have just visited. This is one of those historic landmarkers that you saw previously in the video, in the clip of us on Garrett Mountain, and to show you what the soldiers would have actually seen while stationed on top of the mountain. This is a view of New York City from the top of the mountain. Now, there's a few things in here that you might notice, such as the New York City background. This is where they would spy on the British troops in New York City. Keep an eye on them, making sure they're not leaving to attack the Americans. I am now located in Paterson, New Jersey, at the Great Falls of the Passaic River. Here, in July of 1778,
General George Washington, on his way back after his victory at the Battle of Monmouth, stopped here with two of his assistants to have a lunch. Those assistants' names are the Marquis de Lafayette, who was a French nobleman who was helping out the American cause, and a young Alexander Hamilton. Yes, that Alexander Hamilton, the one that is on the $10 bill. While they were stationed here, while they were having their lunch, literally just below where I'm standing right now, Alexander Hamilton noticed the power of the Great Falls. Noticed that the falls themselves could be a powerful ally in industrializing the United States and making the United States very wealthy. Years later, when he is Secretary of the Treasury under President George Washington, he comes up with the plan for Paterson, making it the first industrial city in the United States. This sparks the American Industrial Revolution, which eventually leads to the United States becoming a world superpower. This is yet another example of how history of not only New Jersey, but America is located directly in our backyard. These falls travel 77 feet down from where they are falling from the river to the gorge below. It is the second largest waterfall by volume this side of the Mississippi River, second only to Niagara Falls. This National Historic Landmark was signed into law, or was made a National Historic Landmark by President Barack Obama. History, ladies and gentlemen, it's in our backyard, it's all around us. All you gotta do is take a look and you can see it. Now, author Ron Chernow, in his biography Alexander Hamilton, describes the moment where Washington, Lafayette, and Hamilton had dinner outside of the Paterson Falls. Quote, "The Great Falls of the Passaic River in northern New Jersey offered one of the finest situations in the world. Hamilton knew the secluded spot well. One day, during the Revolution, he, Washington, and Lafayette had picnicked by the falls, enjoying a modest repast of cold ham, tongue, and biscuits in the sylvan setting that momentarily banished thoughts of the war. The Great Falls mark a scenic blend in the Passaic River, the foaming water up to 2 billion gallons per day, plunging 70 feet into the deep, narrow gorge of the brownish-black basalt, blowing a rainbow foam spray into the air." We are now located here at Washington's headquarters in Morristown, New Jersey. Washington made this his winter headquarters at Arnold's Tavern on January 6, 1777. Now it is part of the All Souls Hospital. In December 1779, he established headquarters at the Ford Mansion, now maintained as a museum. And across the street here is the Ford Mansion. This is where Washington stayed with his men during the winter of 1779 and 1780. Here at the Ford Mansion, Washington is memorialized as a hero of the American Revolution. We see Washington here in a statue, riding his horse, gallantly looking down upon all those who come here to view his legacy. Washington has become a hero to many. Through this mansion, where Washington stayed during this winter, Washington dictated the war. Men such as Marquis de Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton spent their entire winter within these walls. I am now walking on the grounds of the Ford Mansion in Morristown, where Washington and his army spent the winter of 1779 and 1780. Right now I am on the front lawn of this mansion. Here, Washington Alexander Hamilton, Marquis Lafayette, and the rest of his army organized the revolution, organized the battle strategy. Washington himself spent many countless hours in the rooms that we are about to walk past, deciding what he was going to do with his army. Here, at the Ford Mansion, George Washington spent that winter. Through this front door, George Washington walked through to meet with his army, to meet with his generals. There's actually a diary entry that Washington had to actually duck in order to make it through this without hitting his head. On January 8th, 1780, General Washington wrote a letter from here in Morristown to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. For a fortnight past, the troops, both officers and men, have been almost perishing of want. Let's take a look at what Washington might have meant by this. Take about 20 seconds while I show you a little bit more here to write down your thoughts of what Washington may have meant by this statement. Now, I know what you're saying. Washington used the word fortnight. I know what that is. However, the game fortnight did not exist during Washington's time. In fact, the term fortnight means a period of 2 weeks. So, judging by what we now know, what do we think Washington meant when he said, for a fortnight past, the troops, both officers and men, have been almost perishing of want?
For a fortnight past, the troops, both officers and men, have been almost perishing for wants.
Now, unfortunately, at this time, we cannot go into the building itself, as it is closed off. However, we will take a look at some pictures and images that I have taken when I came here a few years ago, and you can see the inside plus the rooms where they were kept. Washington walked literally the same path that I am walking at this moment. Jockey Hollow is located a short distance from here where his army was actually encamped. This is yet another example of Washington and American history right in our backyard here in New Jersey. If you ever get the opportunity to come here, please take the moment to come and check out this location. Let's head back to the study.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so because we were unable to actually get into the Ford Mansion and actually look in it while we were at the location, I went there a few years ago and I took some pictures along the inside. So I want to show you what the inside actually looks like of this mansion. So here we are at the entrance where we were. This was actually taken in December. So this is around the time period that Washington would have been staying there. So the grounds could have looked like this outside of the 28 snowstorms that they actually had there that year. So these are some examples here of what an average colonial person would wear. The gentleman's on the left, the ladies are on the right. You got the shoes, you got the waist jacket, you got belt buckles, you have a hat. This is what an average person would wear at the time period. So what we have here is the kitchen and the pantry and the dining room. The kitchen was very crowded during Washington's stay. He wrote, 18 servants belong to my family, and all Mrs. Ford's servants are crowded together in her kitchen, and scarce one of them able to speak for the codes they have caught. Mrs. Ford's cook and Washington's 2 cooks attempted to make separate meals for their respective families using a single kitchen and fireplace. Some of the crowding was finally relieved when a separate log kitchen was built in February. This is Mrs. Ford's room. So during Washington's stay, Mrs. Ford and her 4 children moved into the ground floor of rooms. This room served as the bedroom for Mrs. Ford and her 12-year-old daughter Elizabeth. The family also ate and entertained in this room. So imagine being 12 years old, as many of you are right now, and you are stuck here with your mom and guests in one room. You eat, you sleep, and you have guests all within this one room because General Washington has basically the entire second story of your house. This is the aides bedroom. This is where the Marquis de Lafayette and Alexander Hamilton slept. The beds in this room are replicas of the folding camp coats used by officers. Although the beds appear short, they can accommodate today's average-sized man. People in the 18th century were on average about 5'8" tall. So a little shorter than myself. Think of like a shorter adult was the average height in the 18th century, which is the 1700s. This is where Washington and his wife, Martha Washington, slept. Since there was little fighting time during the winter, many officers would take furlough, which means a break, and return home to take care of their personal business. However, during the 8 years of the Revolutionary War, Washington never took a furlough. Once the Army went to winter quarters, Mrs. Washington would leave Virginia to spend the winter with the general. She spent much of her day here entertaining guests, knitting, and reading. There's the bed they slept in, there's the desk they worked at, there's the dresser where they had their clothing and stuff that they would bring with them. This is Washington's office. Here, General Washington carried out much of the daily business and correspondence that enabled the Army to survive the harsh winter of 1779 and 80. In the morning, Washington washed and shaved in this room.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my study. I hope you enjoyed that short adventure we went on, where we got to go to the top of the Watchung Ridge, to Rifle Camp Park, where George Washington stationed several American riflemen to keep an eye on the British in New York City. Then we traveled to the Paterson Great Falls, where George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and the Marquis de Lafayette stayed and had lunch in the shadow of those falls, coming up with the idea of the American Industrial Revolution, which leads America to becoming a superpower way down the line. An interesting tidbit, those falls are actually around the block from the school where I teach. So once again, history literally in the backyard of where I am located as a teacher. We finally finished off our adventure going to see the actual Ford Mansion. We saw the grounds, we saw the Washington statue, we saw trees that were leaned up, that Washington himself probably leaned on. We saw the doorway where he walked through every single day during this winter, and how it went on. So now we're going to do a short activity. What we're going to do is move from our adventures of traveling different places to go do an activity now. So if you take the sheet that is labeled notes and you flip it over to where it says Morristown Argument, you're going to see an area where you're going to be putting down your information. So, in a letter dated March 17th, 1780, to the Marquis de Lafayette, George Washington wrote, "The oldest people now living in the country do not remember so hard a winter as the one we are emerging from. In a word, the severity of the frost exceeded anything of the kind that had ever been experienced in this climate before. Conditions, in fact, were much worse in that Morristown winter than the better-known Valley Forge encampment of 1777-1778, in which nearly 3,000 soldiers perished. Only 100 to 300 soldiers died in Morristown. However, the survival rate of this is credited to vaccinations against smallpox, barracks that protected from the damp cold, and soldiers more experienced than a few years beforehand." Moreover, even with the harsh weather conditions, Morristown had much to recommend it. Now, we are going to examine the details to determine why Morristown was an ideal place for the encampment. Let's begin by looking at what Morristown had to offer. It was only 31 miles from New York City. That's a 2-day march. or a 30 to 40-minute drive by car today. The Continental Army could move in any direction. It could move south to Philadelphia, where the Continental Congress was stationed and being held. It could move north to New York, where it could harass, attack, or keep an eye on the British soldiers who were there. Even further north in New England were patriots such as John and Samuel Adams and John Hancock that started the American protest in Boston, Massachusetts in the 1760s, Stamp Act protest, and later in the 1770s, the Boston Massacre occurred there, in which John Adams actually defended the British soldiers accused in the Boston Massacre. You have the Boston Tea Party happening in 1773, where Samuel Adams organized this huge protest against the Tea Act, where he dumped 332 chests of tea in the Boston Harbor. And you also have the battles of Lexington and Concord, which are the first battles of the American Revolution, as well as the Battle of Bunker Hill, which is right outside Boston and Charleston. And it is the first major battle of the American Revolution. The generals and officers could live in local homes. They didn't have to live in huts. They were able to go out. The region was geographically protected by the Watchung Mountains. We were at the Watchung Mountains earlier today when we visited Rifle Camp Park. There are Arapahoe Hills, the Hudson Valley Highlands, and swampland to the east. It was protected by natural barriers around it, making it difficult to be attacked. Nearby forests and rivers offered plentiful resources of wood and water. They were able to survive. There was food there. There was a lot of things in there that would just make it possible for a large army to survive. Only a few roads crossed through Morristown during the Revolutionary era, so it was defensible. There's less of a chance of a surprise attack. If you have less roads, then you have less to defend and lowers the risk of being caught off guard, especially if you're trying to move in a massive army by foot to these locations. The region southwest of Morristown was called Jockey Hollow, and that's where the main army was stationed. And it offered approximately 600 acres of forest cut down to build 1,000 huts. Washington designed these huts at 14 by 15 feet, 6 by 6 feet high, sealed with clay to protect from the cold, and each had a fireplace. Each log house could provide shelter for 12 soldiers. So Washington himself organized it and designed these huts, and the soldiers themselves had to build it before they were able to live in it. Now, I'm not sure about your school, but in my school, we like doing something called cross-curricular, which means even though this is a history class and a history lesson, I like to incorporate different things such as ELA, math, science, music, arts, gym into my lessons. So today I want to quickly do a short little math exercise with this. So if there are 600 acres to build on, and Washington is able to build 1,000 huts, and each hut or log house could have 12 soldiers, how many soldiers are in Washington's army? I'll give you about 20 seconds to do that math. Awesome. So if there are 1,000 huts, and we multiply that by the 12 men per hut, that means that there was about 12,000 soldiers in Washington's Continental Army during the winter of 1779 and 1780. Just imagine how difficult that must have been to have all these people in one area all together during this. We're now going to move on to our activity. Okay, soldier, you are now tasked with convincing General Washington to make Morristown the winter headquarters for the Continental Army. This is no small task, as General Washington is known as a very stubborn man. However, you have some ways to convince him. You have been doing your research and you have seen that there are several positives that we went over before. 5 minutes before, I'll put the slide back on, don't worry. So you're going to use those positives to craft the 3 most powerful arguments that you could think of in support of making Morristown the winter headquarters. Now, you do luck out in the fact that you are not just a soldier in the Continental Army. You are an officer. You do not need to sit and write this letter in the log cabins that the rest of the Army is staying in. In fact, you are currently staying at a house of one of the more wealthy New Jerseyans who was so gracious to allow you to come to their home. Now, although about only 1/3 of the Americans support the war for independence, a lot of people in New Jersey tend to side with whatever side is in their town. And right now it's the American Army, therefore they support the American Army. So I want you to imagine right now, you are in this beautiful colonial style home. The family is having a party on the first floor. You're in your study up on the second floor, right in this draft. The party's going on, and much like parties today, there is food, there's dancing, there's music. So that's what we're going to be doing today. You are going to be allowed to write this argument. Remember, the 3 most powerful pieces of evidence that you find to convince Washington to stay at Morristown while you'll be listening to some music. Now, unfortunately, because of copyright infringement and other issues, I can't actually be playing the music through the audio on this one. However, you have lucked out because I will be doing it for you. However, it's not going to be good, and I apologize if your ears start bleeding during it, but at least you get to hear a piece of music from it. Now, this is called Pachelbel's Canon in D minor. It was written about 120 years before Washington went to Morristown. However, you as a good colonial officer are a fan of music, and you grew up listening to this at your family's home. So we're going to be listening to that as we go through this. So I'll put up the directions now. Once again, so you can see it. Okay, so once again, imagine you are a member of General Washington's staff during the fall of 1779. Write a proposal arguing in favor of Morristown as the winter campsite. Please take the next 4 minutes or so to craft an argument to convince General Washington that Morristown is the place to be. Feel free to use this map that's up here now, as well as the description that I'm going to show you on the previous screen. I'm going to mainly focus on the descriptions. So I'm going to leave this one up here. I'll tilt this down a little bit so you can see. And we are going to be, you have to the end of this song or piece of music to actually finish your argument. Thank you, soldier. Hopefully, your argument was able to convince the general to stay here at Morristown. Because if it did, although it's going to be a cold winter, it's going to be a hard winter, and it's going to be a wet winter, the Army will survive. There will be no British attack. And although a few hundred soldiers will die from hunger, disease, the elements, cold, such as that, snow, the Army will make it out in spring and will be stronger. And with the end of the war in sight now, it is quite possible that your letter convincing Washington to stay here at Morristown may have saved the revolution. So thank you for your service to this country. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to take a quick moment to actually look at two primary source documents of people who are describing what life was like at Morristown during this time period. So the first person I would like to look at is a young man named Joseph Plum Martin. He was in the Continental Army throughout the majority of its existence. He was present at the Battle of New York and served until the end of the Revolution. Now, what makes Private Joseph Plum Martin interesting is he was only 15 years old when he joined the Continental Army and had just turned 19 when he went to stay at the Morristown encampment. He wrote, "We are absolutely, literally starving. I do solemnly declare that I did not put a single morsel of victuals into my mouth for 4 days and as many nights, except for a little black birch bark which I gnawed off a stick of wood. I saw men roast their old shoes and eat them. His uniform was laughably could be what called a uniform. Possessed a blanket thin enough to have straws shoot through it without discombobulating the threads." So that just gives you an idea of what life was like at this time period. He has not eaten in 4 days. He's watching people eat their own shoes. He is eating bark off of trees. His jacket is so thin, it can't even be called a jacket. And his blanket has so many holes in it, and the fibers are so strung out of it, that grass and straw is able to just go right through without even disturbing anything. And now I want to look at this gentleman here, General John D. Caleb. He stated that it was so cold that the ink freezes on my pen while I am sitting close to the fire. The roads are piled with snow until at some places they are elevated 12 feet above their ordinary level. So even by a fire, it is so cold in these huts, in these houses, that the ink is freezing as they're trying to write. Now, the 12 feet of snow is not 12 feet of snow that just came down. These are snowdrifts. Now, many of you might have seen this in the wintertime. During a snowstorm, you may have noticed that the snow tends to get deeper as you move closer to a building. This is because the snow hits the side of the building and falls down until at some places they are elevated about 12 to 15 feet. Most of them were 9 feet, but still, when you open the door, you're not able to get through. You're not going to be able to get out. So this is just two examples of what people at this time period were going through. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are now getting to the end of our lesson. So if you could please flip over your piece of paper to the last page that is labeled Exit Ticket. You should have a number 4 on the top right corner. Now, earlier in the lesson, if you recall, we claimed that New Jersey was known as the crossroads of the Revolution. Based on what we went over in the past hour, the traveling we did, the discussion we had, the primary sources from the letters that we read, we wrote, all those aspects, we put them all together. Why do you think New Jersey is known as the crossroad of the Revolution? Please be sure to include evidence to support your claim. Now, New Jersey is known as the crossroads of the Revolution because it held a key geographical position at the center of the new nation, and the armies were in or crossing it throughout the war. You have New England above New Jersey, you have the southern colonies below New Jersey. New Jersey was used as a way to get from New England to the middle colonies, to the southern colonies, to get to New York City, to Pennsylvania, to get everywhere people crossed through New Jersey. Washington's troops crossed New Jersey from New York in 1776, following the battle and the loss of New York, chased by the British after the fall. From the Continental Army's desperate retreat in 1776 from Fort Lee across New Jersey to crossing the Delaware on Christmas night to attack the Hessians at Trenton. From the Battle of Monmouth to the brutal winter of 1779 to 1780 that the Continental Army spent in Morristown. From the Battle of Springfield to Washington's headquarters at Kingston, where he received news of the end of the war. New Jersey's role in the founding of the nation was vital. I would like to sincerely thank you for taking the time to learn a little bit about New Jersey's history, as well as spending the past hour with me. It was a pleasure doing this. I hope that I was able to spark some curiosity in the importance of history of your own state. I know all of you will have great success if you put your mind to it and passion into your education. I will leave you with these last closing quotes from General George Washington. The best means of forming a virtuous, happy people will be found in the right education of the youth. Without this foundation, every other means, in my opinion, must fail. Thank you again. Have a great day. I really hope you enjoyed our trip through not only American history, but focusing on New Jersey history. We visited the Ford Mansion where Washington stayed during the winters of 1779 and 1780 in Morristown, New Jersey. We discussed the living conditions of Jockey Hollow, located right outside Morristown, where the Continental Army spent that winter. We visited the Paterson Great Falls, where George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, and the Marquis de Lafayette sat and had dinner and came up with the idea of making America an industrialized and powerful nation. And we visited Rifle Camp Park, where a group of riflemen protected Washington's army from the British soldiers stationed in New York City. Please, when you get a chance, look for the history in your own backyard. It's all around us. Hopefully, I was able to spark an interest in the history that you could see with your own eyes, you could touch with your own hands. Again, my name has been Christopher Kopitar, history teacher at College Achieve Patterson Charter School in Patterson, New Jersey. Thank you for spending the time with me. Good luck and have a great rest of the year.